Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I am your host, Alex Bonds, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by John Shapiro of Optalitix. John, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you, Alex?
Thanks I'm all. No, not at all. No, well, thank you very much. I'm doing okay actually, but I've got my World of Warcraft best look because I've got my noise. We were just discussing the merits of noise cancelling headphones. I do love them, but I'm not sure about the look. But that's what we need to do.
You've got AI in motion, so there you go.
Well, I've got my best Steve Jobs, turtleneck on as well, so we'll be getting there. But John, before we pile into it, it'd be lovely if you could introduce Optalitix and what it is the business does, and obviously yourself to the people that don't know you.
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess maybe on me first. I suppose so I've got a tech background. Did software engineering, and as I think I once joked with you before, I did AI before it was kind of a buzzword.
Before it was cool.
Exactly. We hope it's cool now.
You're an AI hipster.
So I mean, I remember, I did neural networks at university, and this was like in the late 90s, and remember publishing a paper at a conference I went to, and it was like one of the only AI papers there. And when you go today and you look, and I think it was on recognizing shapes on maps for electrifying townships in South Africa. So how we applied AI to that, I don't quite know, but we managed to. Then I came over to the UK around 96, and I've had a few startups or businesses, I prefer to call them. So I had a e-billing company, which I co-founded 1999-2000, and that got sold to Bax, a joint venture between Bax, an American company called CheckFree. And then after that, had a software services company called Linksfield Technologies, and that we did a lot of financial services software. And I started there to get an insight into the insurance market, and we actually built quite a cool fuzzy search engine for financial sanctions when they came out, to allow companies to search the financial sanctions register. That was kind of, I suppose, an early application of AI. And that company got sold to Northdale, who actually were, and are still, work a lot in the insurance market. And that search engine, I think, is still used by a number of insurance companies today.
Awesome.
So, and then, that was in 2012, and Danny Katz, who's my co-founder in Optalitix, he's, I guess, much more steeped in the insurance market and business. He's an actuary, worked for Towers Watson, and then actually helped set up Vitality in the UK. So when they first came to the UK, Danny was one of their first employees, and worked there pretty much until we set up Optalitix together in 2013. So we're based in London, headquartered in Camden, and our team today consists primarily of a mixture of developers, actuaries, who we tolerate, I suppose. Don't tell Danny.
They all call themselves data scientists these days.
Well, I was going to say, and data scientists. So we've got data scientists as well. And I suppose, if I had to sum up Optalitix, I'd say we really help supercharge companies by making their systems smarter, and helping them to earn more revenue and be more efficient in what they do. And we've developed our product Acumen, that's really at the heart of this. And the solutions around Acumen comprise AI and data, and surprisingly, perhaps, and we'll hopefully we'll get into this a bit later, helping to eliminate what I call the digital drag caused by spreadsheets, which are a kind of key component in so many of the markets that we look at now. We allow people to kind of instantly convert their models in Excel into APIs and into systems. We support R and Python. And once that data is flowing, then you can apply all the AI and the other stuff that we do. But it's just incredible how much RP and knowledge and smarts are locked up in models sitting on the desktops of actuaries and data scientists, that are sitting in insurance companies and other companies.
Yeah, it's frightening, but just from a kind of strategic risk point of view, like the amount of stuff that's just sat, like you say, on a desktop, and it's like, oh, the entire, modeling of maybe a line of business, let's say, just sat on a specific desktop in a specific building.
Absolutely.
I mean, do you still see that? I mean, that's still something you see on a regular basis. I mean, I know it sounds, your exposure to it is better than mine. I imagine that in my head, but is that something that's still very much alive and kicking?
Unbelievably. And it's interesting. And I never thought I'd get to learn as much about spreadsheets as perhaps I have done in recent years. But there's something like 800 million users of Excel around the world, and
Wow.
a very large proportion of those. If you compare that to, say, software developers, where there might be, I don't know, 80 million, something like that, numbers or something like that. So, there's a massive of all those Excel users. A lot of them are using it to develop systems. And, we met when we went through the Lloyd's lab, and we were in the Lloyd's Innovation Lab recently. I was absolutely astounded at how billions of pounds of revenue in business being done using spreadsheets. It is flabbergasting. And it's interesting. I'll tell you an anecdote about Danny, and this was actually one of the drivers when we started Optalitix. So Danny was sitting in this insurance company, and he was coming up with these incredible models, predicting which customers would lapse, for example. Which ones are likely to stay with us, which ones are likely to go. And you go, great, I can tell you that these 20% of customers are likely to give up their policies. And they go, okay, so what do we do with that? They go, well, you should use it. Well, how do we use it? Well, it's stuck in your spreadsheet. And how do we make the call center know when someone calls up that that's the person that they need to offer a discount to, or upsell? And so that was kind of where we started with our whole thinking around Optalitix and, operationalizing that AI. But that's, it's kind of a small example, but there's a lot happening on spreadsheets.
Because it's interesting there that you make a really important there's a really important point, I think, in that analogy, is that it's not just about identifying what the data, right? It's like, what are you going to do with it, and have you got things in place to kind of escalate that data? Because I think it's very obvious that insurance is kind of a bit late to the party in realizing how much data it has and how powerful that data is. But is there still a big gap that you find that they might know that there's these beautiful data points that they can make money out of, but there's still a gap between that and operationally impacting how they change their business model to take advantage?
Yeah, I think that's the lack of take up in operationalizing AI. That's a I guess that's a term that we use often. I think is still a big challenge for companies. And we see it. We work as we don't only work in the insurance market. We work in banking. We've got banking and lending clients. We work in healthcare. And what we've seen is in some of those clients that have been able to operationalize that AI, what a difference it's made. And if you look at if you look at Vitality, so they're a client of ours, and how they use their data and how they apply AI and how we've worked with them. They're really all about data. They use it a lot, and that makes a massive difference if you can actually connect all the dots from someone applying on a website all the way to the call center agent, and it's the same data, and the models are getting applied, and it goes end to end, and you convert at a higher rate, and they've seen uplifts in sales conversion. It has a real impact. If less customers leave because you're applying the right methods, or you attract more customers, that has a real impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, because I think it's very easy to get stuck in analytics, automation, AI, and see it as a cost saving. and only that. But to that point there, one of the frustrations as a consumer is kind of repeatedly having to tell the same story, give information, because the systems don't talk. I want to talk to Vitality and know that they've got access to all of my data, they know all of the pain points, and everyone in the business has the same information, and it's constantly live and updating. Because I think there's an element as well where, as a consumer, we just expect those things now.
Yeah.
There's a great story. I'm really into stand-up comedy, and trust me, this is related. But there's a stand-up comedian who did this brilliant thing where he's on a flight, and I think this is actually one of these genuinely true stories. And he said, right, he was on one of the first flights where they had internet. And they said, right, guys, you can use the internet now. Feel free to turn your phones on and use the Wi-Fi. And then halfway into this flight, about 2 hours in, that it went down. So they had to announce, "Oh, I'm really sorry, guys. Like, the Wi-Fi is no longer working." And everyone audibly was like, "Oh, for goodness sake!" You go 2 hours ago, you've never ever used Wi-Fi on a plane. 2 hours later, you're like furious. Yeah, exactly. So. But I think the expectation of consumers now is so high when it comes to data. They're giving you the privilege of having their data, and they expect you to kind of use it efficiently. So it's not just about competitive advantage anymore. It's now a kind of
it's a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to sort of take us back a little bit. To you obviously do work in other markets, as you say, healthcare, banking, etc. Who's kind of ahead as an industry? Who's sort of embracing this, or is it not fair to say that it's just certain players within certain industries? Is there any sort of generalizations you can make?
I think a lot of the consumer-facing industries are making real real inroads. So if you look at the Amazons of this world, or AI is it's such a wide topic.
Of course.
You could say, a funny example is you could say, well, car parks are really advanced because, if you think today, you drive up, you take for granted it recognizes your number plate.
Yeah.
Then it will tell you where your car's parked when you go to some of the airport terminals. Now, people just take that for granted now, but 5-10 years ago, just recognizing a number plate was a big deal, or recognizing an image. We take Alexa for granted now. You look at what Google and Lloyd's are doing now with this new online insurer with Key, where they're using natural language recognition and document recognition, and a lot of that stuff. OCR has been around for a long time, but now you're actually starting to take advantage of it. So in healthcare, we've been doing some work recently in the COVID space, but also with some of our healthcare clients now looking at taking some of the data and just doing simple triage. So where you might have had someone manually asking about basic symptoms and then working out who this person should see. Should they see a nurse? Should they see a doctor? You can apply those rules. A computer can do that pretty efficiently and can make that process very, very quick and easy. And when you think about it, it's obvious, but people aren't doing it. So there's a lot of different cases. But insurance is an interesting industry, and there are a lot of opportunities in it.
Do you think the opportunity insurance is disproportionately large to other industries, though, potentially?
Well, I suppose I've got a bit of a skewed view because we look a lot at the insurance industry, and it's interesting because if you look at some of the programs, we've been lucky in Optalitix to go through the Accenture FinTech Lab, and we've done the Lloyd's Innovation Lab, and now we're doing Mass Challenge as well. In the US, we've just been selected into that, and the theme across all of these, what it allows us to do is to talk to these companies and to talk to insurance companies, big and small. And there's some real common themes that are coming out. And one of them, which we've touched on already, is data. So data is really the lifeblood, both for AI and other operational efficiency, but particularly for AI. You can't really do AI without data. And insurers are really desperate to use it. It's it's very often locked up. I spoke before about spreadsheets, and it's not just the models, but the data is often locked up in them. But if you look at Lloyd's and this this case study that we recently did with them, where it's this claim, they had a claim system, and that was something we developed with them through the Lloyd's lab. They're saving something like 13,000 hours a year of work through this implementation, which was really originally people using spreadsheets to upload data, somebody manually checking it, and for us just to automate that, to have a computer check it, for someone to get instant feedback. There's like, I don't know, hundreds of insurers using the platform, and all of them are saving hours per year. But that's just one tiny piece that we've addressed. Go Compare are a client of ours. They're doing some fantastic work in making analytics data available in partnerships with their partners, and this is having a real impact on allowing consumers to get better pricing, because insurers can understand now where there are gaps, why they aren't competitive, and this ultimately drives better service for the customer, better pricing for the consumer. All that driven through data. So I think the thing with insurance is there is so much. There's a lot of data, complex. There are parts of it that are hard with pricing, with prediction. So if you look right through the value chain, there's a massive opportunity to address it.
It's so broad as well, and I've had this conversation a few times, and as you work with actuaries and data scientists, hopefully you can give me an objective view on this. But one of the challenges I see is that, historically the custodians of data have in insurance businesses it's been siloed, hasn't it? You've had finance has got some data, claims has got some data, actuaries have got some data. And it's interesting for me looking at the structure of kind of the new, data specific roles, something like data science. And the ones that seem to do it well have kind of basically gone, data is its own function, but it has these reports from other different areas. But there seems to be a fight. There's typically a fight between the actuaries who kind of feel that they should own the data science. Is that for you the kind of modern insurer, is that data is so core that it should be its standalone function, but obviously it sits within other things? Is that something that you would share as a sentiment?
Yeah, I think it's it's got to be a combination. So I think sometimes when you create departments like a data department, you got to be careful not to disintermediate the people who own the data or use the data.
Sure.
So it's got to be enabling, and we've worked with some companies which are great at that. The data or the chief data officer is an enabler who's saying, okay, I need to give you the tools to be able to use it. And then I think the others that are blockers, and where the obstacles kind of are not invented here syndrome, we have to do it. We don't work with external companies. Obviously, that's particularly frustrating for us.
I feel your pain on that, John. Sometimes I get the same response. This is not so fun.
But yeah, I think it's being recognized as a core competency now. And I think what's interesting is that companies are realizing how much data is an asset and how they have to treat it as an asset. And then you need to work out, well, how do we best benefit from that asset that we hold? Quantify it, classify it, and then actually use it. So I think,
No, sorry, I was going to say it comes back to your spreadsheet point, and the first step is getting that data into a usable format, right? Is getting it to a point where you can actually do something with it and access it. And
absolutely. And if you look at what an insurer we were working with recently, and they were quoting on a spreadsheet. It was a small line of business for them, so their IT department didn't want to, but they were looking at much bigger systems, and this is a small percentage of business, but it was an important line for them, and brokers kept wanting to re-quote or to get new quotes for business, or to renew business, and they'd have to mail in information and then and then wait for the spreadsheet to be populated and for it to be sent back. Now, what happened also is all that data was lost. So the next year, there was nothing on a system about what they quoted. They might have done 5 quotes. They probably saved down the last one, which was the final one they agreed, but nothing along that journey. We changed that literally in a few weeks. We took that spreadsheet, we converted it into an API. The brokers connected into it via an API, and they've seen a massive uplift. One, much more volume. So actually, it's become a bigger part of their business now. Brokers are sending them more business because they get quicker turnarounds. And what they spent was, I mean, we definitely didn't charge them enough.
Yeah,
but,
you should get a cut on profits. Do some deals like that. Yeah.
But you could really see them. But what's as important is they now have that data. So now they can actually start applying models to that and saying, well, actually, maybe we could automate that piece, or we could start predicting what price or discount we should give, or even just summarizing it so the actuaries or the underwriters who are doing that pricing can have information about the whole universe that they've been looking at. So that's just like one tiny example.
And that's the other thing that I think that's come out of some of the conversations I've had around AI and particularly data is that once you start to kind of apply it and you take away the kind of monotonous tasks, you can then look to create new products. It creates opportunities. It's not as simple as, it's not just getting rid of cost. It's freeing up time to be creative, create better experiences for customers when it comes to things like vitality. In this example, maybe they can kind of price better, or they can kind of add additional products to the same kind of suite or line of business. So it's all about kind of enabling businesses to have more time to be kind of more creative and add more value as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, sorry, please. No, go on.
No, carry on. Sorry.
It's with the mic too close to me. I'm too quick on the draw with my comments. But I was going to ask you about incumbents versus startups. When it comes to the application of AI, I think there's one school of thought that startups in a way can apply some of these tools easier because they can build foundationally this as part of their function. But then arguably there's greater wins for legacy businesses. So
very interesting, very interesting question. And it's partly, and I agree with you, because when one way you look at it, it's a bit counterintuitive, because you think startup AI, naturally, greenfield systems, legacy, but, and there's a big but, the incumbents have tons of data. And again, coming back to assets, they've got tons of data assets, and the opportunity for them to exploit that data and to leverage that data is massive compared to startups, I think, which they can be nimble. They start with a clean slate for tech, but their challenge is they've got to build their customer base and build their data and their history. And it's funny, actually, because when we started out, we used to say, and Danny and I often used to joke together, that we'd say Optalitix gave systems a brain. We go into companies and say, we'll give your systems a brain. You've got these legacy systems, can't work out. We had these insurers who didn't know how to make their systems smarter, but they weren't going to go and chuck out all their systems and put in this shiny new thing. But by giving them an API or making it easy to connect or adding a model in one or two places, we could really see how you could leverage that. So I think we see that there's a massive opportunity for incumbents to create big value. Their customer base is an asset. They can work out, how do we hold on to them longer? How do we give them more personalized choices? How do we optimize the cost for them? How do we sell them more product? All of those are massive value for a consumer. When you look at the investment that they have to put into the AI system as they look at it versus the uplift they can get, the business value, it's a no-brainer. It doesn't not always seem like that. There's a lot of hard work to get that, but it is. It's incredible.
Well, it's the value of those incremental wins, isn't it? And I think what's come out of a lot of these talks, and I spoke to a few people on automation and just change and innovation in general. I had a great conversation this morning with the guys from Cognitive Risk, and that one of the phrases I really liked was micro innovation.
Yeah.
And they were like just little wins, like applying. You were talking about a very small line of business, but presumably you've made it now a very profitable, significant line of business by making it a much more efficient process.
Yeah.
And that sort of, if you look at change and innovation on a kind of balance sheet perspective, and if you challenge innovation to have an ROI, you can start on something small, and if that delivers value, then you can do something slightly bigger. But I think sometimes we kind of look at these big changes and go, there's this big meal that you've got to kind of consume whole, but you don't need to do that. You can make smaller changes.
And it's funny because that's often one of the key blockers in AI, and I think I so believe and buy into that. Start small, do proof of concepts. If you look at this as this massive strategy that we've got to do end to end, you generally get stuck, and I think that it's that embrace POCs, embrace change, be prepared to potentially have to rework, refactor, redo things in a better way, but your learnings are valuable too. But there's we go into we see opportunities where you can make an immediate impact, and you sometimes will get feedback from a company going, okay, but that's only like step one, and we have to like define our whole roadmap, and we're going to be taking 6 months to do that, and then we'll kind of come back and we'll work out where that cog. Well, actually, in 2 weeks' time, we can have that done. Like it's going to take you that long to set up the meeting to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny thing to laugh at, but it's so true, isn't it? I mean, I used to work for RSA, and I've talked about it a few times. I wasn't there very long, and I was there like a year, and I was a graduate, so I was a terrible employee because I thought I should be running the show. But one of the things that happened while I was there, they rolled out a new system. And it was months and months and months. It was like a 12-month project, and it came online. And two things happened. One, it was clear that no one that was actually going to be using it had been involved in making it. Disaster number one. Disaster number two was just that, it didn't work very well. But it probably, if you're going to take 12 months to make anything, a business changes in 12 months. It's not going to be fit for purpose. So if you're going to take 6 months to do your roadmap of the entire thing, the business is going to change, and then step one probably doesn't look like step one anymore. So, but is that something you think is culturally more aligned with just big businesses, established businesses, or is that specific to the insurance market, that kind of cultural thinking?
I think it probably is wider than it is wider than just the insurance, and not even in big business, in medium-sized businesses. And I think if you look, there's and some of the blockers that we face. We say, well, what stands in the way? People are one of the biggest blockers. And because there's fear. A lot of RT teams and data teams now who sit next to them are scared of implementing AI or scared of implementing an innovative solution. They don't understand it. They're worried that if they bring in external people, it's going to make them seem less valuable or less able. Sometimes you come in and you fighting against the fact that there's been a failed project because of that. So you've got some, an RT team who perhaps has been inexperienced, who've kind of picked up a book on it, or gone and done their Coursera course, and now they're a data and AI expert, and and then they've done, they've gone and they've clicked on build an automatic model on Azure ML or AWS, and then they've come and said, great, we've implemented AI and it doesn't work, and senior management go, well, what the heck, this AI thing's rubbish, and we're not going to buy into it. That senior management skepticism is something that's really difficult to get over, and you have to buy in through showing business value. Why are we doing it? What is the value going to be? The tools, and I said it before, the tools and the data exist. The cost of doing it is reducing all the time. It's becoming more and more commoditized. You need, if you've got the data, you've got an API stream, you can do it. We've almost moved to, ironically, the tech is not an inhibitor in a lot of cases anymore. Very often we're not sitting around going, how are we going to do that technically? which 5 years ago or 7 years ago, when 8 years ago when we started, we were going in and trying to convince people that they could put their data in the cloud because you could get almost infinite computing power, which could allow you to do. Now people are going, well, we have to be in the cloud.
Yeah.
So you've got over that obstacle, and you've got over the how do we transfer data and the AP. There's so many more ways. Before, when we started, so many systems didn't have API connections. You couldn't get the data out because there wasn't an API. These days, there's far more API connectivity. Even the traditional legacy providers are realizing that if they don't create an API, there's no such, closed systems are dead. You've got to be able to talk to other. So then you'd say to yourself, well, okay, if all these things exist, why aren't you doing it? So that's the one thing, is people. The other thing is sometimes it is data that it's locked up. As I said, people don't know how to get at it, or they're afraid to share it. Sometimes around compliance, we very often have this issue where the compliance team or the data security team will go, well, we can't give you that data. And you go, well, why not? And they go, well, because it's against compliance. You go, well, there's no you don't need the personal information. So you've got to challenge that, and you've got to say, well, you ask that, well, why not? And the value of doing it is so high that it's worth asking those questions. And there's so many times we're able to demonstrate to them when you can get over that, and you can get over the fear, and you can get past the we can't do it, and we're not listening to any suggestions how we can. Then you can say, well, actually, we don't need that personal information in order to build a really smart model to allow you to predict something. Because the person's name and the address and all that stuff isn't actually important. You want some characteristics, which actually you can share, and actually it is compliant.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're sort of it's really exposing something. Someone said to me earlier that we've got to get away from this idea of digitizing insurance. Every insurance company is digital now. It has to be, but what they were saying is we're now moving into an area of intelligent insurance. But there's something about people in that we're not quite yet data literate to the extent that you're talking about, and it plays out in things like not understanding where there's compliance data breach and where there isn't, what the data can and can't be used for, but also what's possible, but it sounds like your job is 90% education, 10% application. It's like we know what to do, we just have to convince you it's the right thing to do.
And it's a massive challenge for us to get that trust from companies, because and I think there is breaking into the insurance industry is difficult. There's there's a network, and there's people who know everybody, and you've got to be a certain size. I mean, inherently they risk
first,
they certainly they certainly know how to evaluate risk. So it's I think that is a challenge. It's frustrating sometimes, because you can walk in and you can go, we've got a solution for you. I think we're getting to a point though where there is a little bit more standardization, and we can go in and I think as a company we're able to offer much more standardized solutions. You can go in and you can say, okay, you've got a pricing spreadsheet and you've got options around that. You can go and you can take a really expensive system, and there are those out there, where you'll have to spend the next 6 months converting that spreadsheet into a completely different language that the person who originally wrote the spreadsheet is not going to understand, not going to be able to test at the end of it. And you're going to have a really whiz-bang system, but you're not even going to really know if it works, and it's going to take you ages. Or you could let that original person work with it, get rid of all the fear around spreadsheets of it's not compliant and it doesn't work with data, make it API compliant, get all the data out, and you can do it in 2 weeks. And actually the original person can test it and can maintain it. And so and then you can allow other people to talk to it. And so I think we're getting, and that's just one example. Obviously there's all the other stuff. You can build the data ADA model and all the other things on top of that. the challenge for us really is, I don't even think it's demonstrating the value so much anymore, because I think often when you walk in, if you can get the time to sit down with the right person and explain it to them, so that's challenge one, is to get to that right person, and then it's for them to trust an external company, and a smaller company, who's not an IBM or an Accenture or a Deloitte who's coming in.
Yeah, yeah. I'm only sort of laughing rudely and about the use of management consultancies in a certain track and trace system that we very expensively pay for. But let's not talk about that. How can a business best sort of get itself ready to embrace AI? What can they do to set themselves up for this kind of
Yeah.
change in their operating system or
So
operation?
I think you touched on it before, and I think um, the I would say be open to experimentation.
Hmm.
Be prepared to do some proof of concepts. Be prepared to look at your data and to share data amongst departments also, and be able to use external systems as well. I think that's sometimes a challenge. If you look at I mean, that's why I'll come back to, like, if you look at what Google's done in the Lloyd's market, that's a massive step forward.
Mm,
There's an embracing, from a really traditional insurance environment and a really innovative company like Google putting their heads together and going, hey, we're gonna do something quite innovative here, and trusting, um, a company like that, a tech company, to work on the data, and that I think is going to be a real a, a real step forward. I think the other thing is about educating at the senior level, senior buy-in. And
mm,
there's probably around lots of board tables in companies, they will have an innovation session. I go, we want to do AI. But do people really understand what that means? Can you translate it into, we want to do AI because, or AI is going to help, or this particular solution where we're going to use AI to, you know, predict customer lapses we want to do it because we want to put another 20% in our bottom line, or another
mhm,
5% uplift in customer take up. And I
mm.
think it's that, you've got really technical people talking about it, or you've got business people who don't understand the tech. And I think it's trying to, mesh those two together. That's really going to, once people start understanding, once senior management start understanding that it's going to have a influence on the bottom line, then I think it's going to really start getting attention.
Mm. And that's that says a lot, I think, about that falls into my world. I think one of the challenges that we have is when you're running insurance businesses today, leadership of insurance businesses, usually these people have come through the function of insurance as it stands, so they might have been underwriting, they might have been operations, obviously they may, they've got CFOs, and people may have had broader worlds, but generally speaking, they're insurance professionals that have kind of graduated to the C-suite, or the leadership roles. And the challenge for that is quite often that they're not bringing those new skills. And one of the challenges I see is that we're very, particularly with insurance, it happens in all other industries as well, is that this classic thing that comes in all the briefs that I see, must have insurance experience. And it might be for a CTO role. And I kind of challenge that, and I go, or analytics, head of analytics as well, must have insurance experience. I kind of challenge that thinking and say, well, do they need that? Why? And wouldn't it be great if they didn't have that and they bring in, some new ideas? Because I bet you bottom dollar that a really senior person in analytics from Google's probably worth having at your table. Just to drop a logo in there. But yeah, I think some of that thinking holds us back a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's an interesting one, because if you look at Lloyd's, and I know you've spoken to a number of the cohorts, and our cohorts and previous cohorts. A
Hmm.
lot of us have gone into that market not really knowing,
Yeah.
um, not knowing the lingo, not knowing, I mean, I understood insurance, but didn't really understand Lloyd's that well when I went there. I think, others around me we've got, and as I said, I've got actuaries in our company, and some of them had worked in Lloyd's and they understand it. But if I talk about my personal journey there, I didn't really understand it that well. But you learn it, and you can see opportunities, and you can look at it. You can say, well, why are you doing it that way? Or I understand, but you could do it better, or here's a different way, or people in banking are doing it that way, or people in or different insurance are doing it that way. So I do think sometimes kind of cross-pollination of ideas is healthy for
Yeah, because you make a really interesting and valid point about the exactly that. I was talking about this the other day. It's funny because we sort of have these briefs that I work in senior level hires and always have to have this insurance experience, and that's, I take that as written. That's pretty much always the way it has to be. But all the money, or a lot of the money being spent, particularly on the insurtech market, which is being kind of invested in by the incumbent insurers, is quite commonly going into businesses with people like yourself who don't actually come from the insurance background, because they're bringing new ideas. And there's something very amusing to me about that, is that we insist on the people that work for us have come from the insurance world, yet we're investing large sums of money in people that are bringing new ideas because they don't come from that world. Yet we're not in housing those people and saying let's get some of the, and that's not universally true, and there's lots of businesses out there be throwing things at the TV or Spotify saying Alex, that's not true, and I concede that, but I think universally there's more of that goes on than not. I don't think it's exclusive to insurance. I'm sure you get it in other industries, in banking and retail, and but it just shows that I think to really innovate, I think you need people like yourself that are asking the question of why. Why do we do it like that? Could we do it a different way? And the answer might be no. And there's a reason why we do it that way, because there's this nuance about insurance that you didn't know. But it's still a good question to ask most of the time.
Yeah, and it makes one of our clients recently is and this is in the medical space, had brought in someone, and one of the few people I think in that business now that didn't come from a medical background, but come from a really operational background, actually from a consulting and business process re-engineering, which is quite unusual to bring into a medical business. But actually we've been working with them, and they just have a different view on it. It's like you've got data and processes and inefficiencies and opportunities, and whether that was in you manufacturing widgets or medical, there's enough other people in the business to do. You obviously have to be sensitive about it, and it's people, and it's medical, or it's cars, or it's insurance, whatever, but there is enough of that expertise. But mixing that with kind of another view is often you get better results or different results.
Yeah, I mean that for me is where the magic happens. So look, I'm conscious of our time. We're already up to the best part of 50 minutes. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about what's happening. You said you're really busy, which is really good to hear. But what's going on with you guys for the rest of the year? What are your plans for world domination?
Well, I think we've got really good plans for Acumen. Our products really coming along. I think we're seeing a lot of demand and a bit more demand and uptake, hopefully in the market. As I mentioned, we're doing Mass Challenge. We're starting to do some work with some US companies, which is really interesting, and potential fundraise on the card. So lots going on. We see a lot of opportunity for growth this year.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and yeah, I think this is it's such an interesting space, and there's so much application out there because particularly in the incumbent industry. I just think, like you say, there's these treasure troves of data that just need utilizing and weaponizing, and this for me it's the value add, because I naively started this going, oh, it's just all about cutting costs, right? That's what I thought. I mean, it's about cutting costs, but the opportunity for new products and greater innovation, and and freeing up people's time to do. Well, that's what struck home with me, is that as someone that deals with people and getting people jobs, people don't want to be checking data entry manually. It's about getting rid of that and allowing people to be creative and add value to businesses. So Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, and you know, but
I'll join you on that soapbox. Anytime we can, it saves people time. It's a great yeah.
it's
Great
good. It's
call.
good. It's exactly. It's a good mission to be on. But John, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being a guest. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.